We are working through our 2023-2024 season superlatives. And on today's show, we're going to wrestle with the question, is Filip Forsberg elite?
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast, and thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off this episode with a shout out to our Locked On Pred heads. Those are our everydayers who tune in to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us each and every day. We appreciate your support. We love spending a little bit of your day with you. I'm Ann Kimmel. I am a writer at Penalty Box Radio, and I have a partner in crime.
I'm Emma Lingen, and I'm the Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
So Emma and I have been working hard this week. We are working through our 2023-2024 season superlatives and review. Kicked it off this week. Of course, we started at the top, Emma. We talked about Barry Trotz and his ice throne. I so wanted to Photoshop a picture of him sitting on the Game of Thrones throne,
Yeah.
but that's outside of my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, everyone. But we are working through the top line and the identity line, reviewing these players' seasons, awarding them season superlatives. Today, we are talking about Filip Forsberg's record-setting season, and we're going to wrestle with the question, is Filip Forsberg elite? I mean, we think so here in Nashville, but let's talk about in the bigger picture. We're also going to award Michael McCarron his season superlative and look at his accomplishments this season as well. Before we dive into all of that, though, want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So, Emma, we are awarding season superlatives. So kick us off. What superlative are you awarding to Filip Forsberg for his 23-24 year?
I would say, I don't know, I struggled with this one, but I think what I landed on was most likely to never have to practice ever again and still continue putting up just insane numbers every year.
I wish I could screen share right now so that you could see that that is exactly mine, is least likely to need practice. How in the world do you miss weeks and weeks and weeks of daily practice with a, quote, cut that won't heal? And we can talk a little bit about the injury, but hopefully I won't hurl, as you know, if we get into that. Did not affect Filip Forsberg at all. I mean, just an incredible season, set the franchise record for goals in a single season. Of course, this was his career best season as well. And you can go all the way back. You know, you talk about those 48 goals that he scored, broke Matt Duchene's record. But you go all the way back to like the first maybe 10 games of the season. And I remember Filip Forsberg was generating some of the best expected goals for in the entire NHL of anybody, and wasn't finishing, was hitting posts or wasn't finishing. So you know that 48 is probably not his offensive ceiling, you know, in a best case scenario. When you think about Filip Forsberg's season, Emma, is there any one specific thing, game, play, or just aspect of his game that really stands out to you?
I think, honestly, I mean, yes, the 48 goals, that was the big one, and that's a franchise record, and we should be talking about that. But I think, too, I mean, he didn't just set a career high in goals, he set a career high in assists too. He had 46 assists, and I think that was maybe the more under the radar stat that I was most impressed by with him, because his whole game, like, he's always been a scorer. That's what he's you know, maybe not a playmaker, but he's a play finisher. Like, he finishes. And with this year, the system, his line mates, whatever, probably a combination of everything, he unlocked that new side of his game where he can be a playmaker too. And he is not just finishing plays, he's starting them, and he's, getting the puck. He's being unselfish. He's getting the puck to his teammates and, seeing the ice differently. He's seeing the shooting lanes and the passing lanes better, it seems like, than he ever has before. And so that to me is the more versatility of his game really, I think, was ramped up in a big way this year. So that was the thing that impressed me the most.
I think so much of what you're talking about there comes back to two things. Of course, the new system, I think, is very much tailor-made for Filip Forsberg and how he sees the ice and how he wants to play. But I also think it has so much to do with those line mates. We've talked about Ryan O'Reilly, we've talked about Gus Nyquist, and, it's hard to look at any of these three players and their seasons in a vacuum. Ryan O'Reilly called him his Swedish meatballs, which will forever be the greatest thing ever spoken in the Nashville Predators locker room. Even if they win a Stanley Cup, that speech will pale in comparison
Yes.
to O'Reilly calling Gus Nyquist and Filip Forsberg his Swedish meatballs. But there's so many things, I think, that set Filip Forsberg up for success. And he had success when you look at him big picture in the entire NHL. He was 6th in the NHL in goals. He was tied for 12th in points with Sam Reinhart and Sidney Crosby, tied for 2nd when it comes to game-winning goals, 4th in goals per 60. Like, this is a player who really emerged. And I think you saw it at the All-Star game because we knew what Filip Forsberg can do, but it was like listening to the announcers at the All-Star game and watching the other players and hearing what Justin Bieber had to say on the bench. It was like people didn't realize who Filip Forsberg was and what he was capable of.
I think people just knew him as like, oh, he's the best, offensive player on the Predators, and kind of saw it relatively that way. But it was never like he had not really been in these conversations for like some of like one of the best forwards in the league.
Right.
And yeah, it was cool to see him get his moment. Cool to see him get a full 82 game season for the first time since 2017. Also a pretty big year for the Predators, but I think
all right.
Yeah. So yeah, see, good things happen when Filip Forsberg is playing well and playing a lot. So it was good. I'm glad that they were able to figure out that top line and get him, get him set up to start showcasing his true, ceiling, I guess.
Yeah. And the 82 games is even more impressive when you remember, like Emma and I said, giving out the superlative, this is somebody who was playing those 82 games with kind of a gross injury, blocked a shot with his ankle, ended up with cuts on both sides of his ankle. They got stitched up. They didn't necessarily heal well. It didn't hurt him in a sneaker, but you put the skate on it became a whole nother thing. So to be able to see his performance while he was dealing with an injury in skates, I mean, he was injured out of skates, but it didn't bother him. But, it really was an impressive season. And this was the season where you really understood why Barry Trotz said, like, this is an offensive player that we can build around. We can reset a team around somebody like Filip Forsberg. But is Filip Forsberg NHL elite? Of course, we in Nashville know that he is the elite offensive player for the Nashville Predators, but is he NHL elite? Emma and I are going to kind of wrestle with that question coming up here in just a minute. And then later on in the show, we're going to talk about the other quote fourth liner. We like to call him the identity line, Michael McCarron. We're going to talk about his season coming up here in just a moment. First, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by our great friends at Game Time. The Nashville Predators may be out of the playoffs, but if you are still wanting to check out some sports postseason action, you need to check out the NBA playoff tickets available on Game Time. Game Time is the fastest and easiest way to get your hands on great NBA tickets and great deals as well. They have killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and they have a low price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. You can also get tickets to enjoy a Nashville Sounds game, Nashville SC, or even check out the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series that is coming this summer. All those tickets are available right now on the Game Time app. Game Time has great last minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute from everything from sports to concerts, comedy shows, live theater. The app also will show you all-in pricing upfront, so there are no surprise fees at checkout. You can even get a panoramic view from your seat on the app before you buy. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Coming up tomorrow, Emma and I are going to put the coach on the hot seat. We are going to share our thoughts on Andrew Brunette's first year behind the bench. And then next week, we're going to dive into the mushy middle six and talk about season performances from some of the players that really tried to make a mark. Some were successful. Some we'll just talk about next week. But right now, we are talking about Filip Forsberg. Couple of questions when you look at Filip Forsberg. Obviously, this season, a huge success. I think people want to know, is he likely to repeat it, or is this a one-off season? And when you look ahead at Barry Trotz's long-term plan to get the Predators back to Cup contention, is Filip Forsberg here for that? What do you think, Emma?
I think, I know this wasn't quite the question you were asking yet, but I think that will he repeat this success next season or more beyond,
Right.
that will honestly, in my opinion, go a long way into answering the is he elite question. Because I think he has elite level ability. I think he has the potential to be elite. I don't know that he's fully, I don't think that we've seen enough of that for him to be considered NHL elite. He's like right there.
Yes.
Like knocking on the door. But I just don't quite see him in that upper echelon. But will he repeat it? I certainly think that he is capable of repeating it. I would like to see him repeat it if he can, have another season where he stays healthy and plays the whole year and, keeps doing what he's doing under Andrew Brunette. Like you said, the system is kind of tailored to him. And you mentioned, to answer your second question, how Barry Trotz has said that he wants to build a team around this guy. And he is the kind of guy that you can build around. And I do see him still being a part of that. It'll be, sort of in the twilight of his career, I think, but I do see him still being a part of it in some way. Maybe by the time that the Predators are ready to contend for a Stanley Cup, maybe Filip Forsberg isn't your leading goal scorer anymore. Maybe he's not your top winger anymore. Maybe he plays a different role in some way. You don't know. Don't have a crystal ball, but I think that he is too important to this franchise for him to not be part of that, of that plan.
Yeah. I think this season goes a long way to getting Forsberg the notice and into the conversation of elite players. When you look at where he ranks, he's ahead when you're talking about like goals per 60 for the season. He's ahead of Pasternak. He's ahead of McKinnon. He's ahead of Steven Stamkos, Brock Besser. But I think the NHL in general, and probably people in Nashville, are still saying, hey, is this season lightning in a bottle? Or is this Filip Forsberg with the right system with the right teammates. And it's like like you said, he's very good. His ceiling is extremely high. That he is the high-end Nashville Predators offensive weapon. To repeat or even exceed this season or consistently have this be the bar for the next couple of seasons, I think gets him there. But it's frustrating to me because I think it's very hard for any player in sort of a middle-sized market team that hasn't made a deep postseason run to get to the point where they can be in the conversation with the Pasternaks or like a Zach Hyman or Sam Reinhart, because the Predators they haven't made that push in the postseason. And I feel like the postseason record is almost more important when you're talking about elite players than it is no matter what you do in the regular season. So I think the sooner the Predators can get back to a deeper run in the postseason, the better that's going to bode for how the NHL as a whole looks at Filip Forsberg, because I do feel like he shocked people at the All-Star game. And I don't think anybody here, I don't think anybody in Nashville was surprised at all about what he was doing, because we see him do stuff all the time. But I think he really surprised people in the NHL as a whole. I don't want to brag, but I kind of feel like he stole the show a little bit.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think this whole season has been the season that we have been waiting for from Filip Forsberg. It's like, it feels like finally that, like, this is what we've been told he can do. And, not that he wasn't good before, of course, but it's just like, now we're starting to see this again, those flashes of eliteness, I think. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing flashes of it. I still don't think he's fully there yet. But again, if he can replicate this or exceed this, and show that this is the bar, this season was the bar, then I think we get into that conversation. And, it's funny what you say. I think it's so true about playing in a mid-sized market. And, anyone within the Predators organization get very sensitive when you call them a non-traditional market or a mid-sized market, but let's call a spade here. Yeah. It's not Boston. It's not Toronto. It's not Pittsburgh. It's not New York. Like, even guys like Roman Josi. I think Roman Josi, if he played in Boston and not Nashville, would be huge. Like, he is so, yes, he's won a Norris Trophy and he's a finalist again. And I think he is just barely in that, like, elite defenseman conversation. I think he is elite. When it comes to defensemen, but he's not going to be the first name that anyone outside of Nashville will mention. He'll be 100%. Like fourth or fifth down the list. And I think that, the market that he's in certainly has a lot to do with that, because they haven't made a long postseason run since 2017. And it's just it's not a, nationally known or internationally known, market. I think that so I would say, not to derail the conversation and talk about Josi, I think the same applies to Forsberg. If he was playing in a bigger market or a different market, I think that his name would, like, people would know him a lot more than they do. Like, this All-Star game would not have been his coming out party for people. Like, they would already know who he was.
Yes, I feel like that. You nailed it. I feel like the All-Star game was his coming out party to everybody else. And meanwhile, we were all like, no, he's really great.
We're like, yeah.
But it's even like, I think, you hear people talking about Sam Reinhart. Now, of course, Sam Reinhart has had, a couple of, really amazing seasons, but statistically, Filip Forsberg has been very, very good too. And they're two very different players, but I think a lot of it is because the Florida Panthers find their way deep into the postseason recently, and that makes a world of difference. So I am 100% here for Filip Forsberg being here when the Predators make a deep playoff run in, who knows, 3 seasons. Let's just ballpark it. Like, let's say 3 seasons from now, we can get Filip Forsberg, that nationally recognized elite status that I feel like if he can repeat this season, he will have definitely earned. So I'm just putting it out there, world. Filip Forsberg. You heard it here, not first, but you heard it here emphatically from Emma and I.
Yes, he definitely has the elite potential.
He does.
So I'd like to see him get there.
Yep. Coming up, we're going to talk about another player that, let's be honest, most people in the NHL aren't talking about, but friends, we here in Nashville are talking about the season that Michael McCarron has had. It's been an interesting career for McCarron here in Nashville. We're going to award him his season superlative coming up in just a minute. First, want to let you know this episode is brought to you by Indeed. There is no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform you need to build yours. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. They streamline hiring with powerful tools that find you matched candidates. With Instant Match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job, according to US Indeed data. So join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at indeed.com/lockedon. Offer good for a limited time. Again, claim your $75 credit now at indeed.com/lockedon. Again, that's indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. All right, we are wrapping up our top line and identity line. I refuse to say fourth line. I am turning into Barry Trotz before your eyes. The identity line. Season superlatives. We have talked about O'Reilly, Nyquist, Forsberg. We have talked about Cole Smith, Kiefer Sherwood. We're going to talk about Michael McCarron today. So, Emma, why don't you kick us off? What is the superlative that you are awarding Michael McCarron for his season?
My superlative for Michael McCarron is most likely to give himself a superlative. And I don't mean that. I mean that in the most endearing way possible.
So explain.
The man does not lack confidence, but he somehow does it. He's not cocky. He's not conceited. He's not arrogant, but he's very confident and just gregarious. Like, he's just very confident in himself. And he's just lovably confident, I would say. I would like to set the record straight on one thing, because I feel like this needs to be said. There's been a lot of talk, I feel like, about how he got the nickname Big Sexy. And, I've seen the media, like national media, talk about, oh yeah, the fans just started calling him that. No, friends, he started calling himself that. And that is why, because again, I was present for the conversation when the name Big Sexy was born. Let me take you back to fall of 2022.
Let's go, Emma. Rat him out. Rat him out.
Ryan McDonough has just arrived in Nashville. Now, what do those two guys have in common? They both have the nickname Mac. Now, Ryan McDonough, older, more tenured, like more senior player. He's the reigning Mac. Like, you have to let him have Mac. And so I was standing there with a couple other members of the team staff at the time, and we said, okay, Macker, to McCarron, we say, okay, Macker, what's your nickname? There's already a Mac now. You got to change your nickname. What's your nickname going to be? Without hesitation, this man goes, Big Sexy. Just like shrugs his shoulders. It's like, duh, like Big Sexy. We're like, oh Lord, have mercy. That is, he would give himself that name. But like, there was another thing we had to do when I worked for the team, that it was like they do a player, like a season yearbook, and we have to ask all the players these silly questions like, who's the best cook on the team, and if you were an animal, what would you be, and stuff like that. And one of the ones we had to ask was, who's the funniest guy on the team? And everyone, almost to a man, this past season said Tyson Barrie was without a doubt the funniest guy on the team. Except for Michael McCarron, who said himself. So, but again, he does, it's like very endearing. I remember when they did Movember last year, he was like declaring himself the winner of Movember. I'm like, buddy, have you seen Filip Forsberg? He's kind of like a pro at this. Like, but again, he doesn't lack confidence. And I think that that's great. And he's able to be confident in a way that's not arrogant. And it's in a way that maybe it is arrogant, but not in like an off-putting way.
No.
He's still very much a team first guy when it really comes down to it. And he's extremely complimentary of his teammates, his line mates. We see in the way that he plays that he will absolutely go to the mat for anyone. And he, like, this guy, again, when I worked for the team, and he's one of the guys I got pretty close with, especially for a while when he was a healthy scratch a lot. He watched a lot of games with me in the press box, and so we got to talk a lot. And like, he has offered to fight people for me before, like if I got dumped or something and he's like, you want me to fight him? Like, no, like, okay, that's not how we settle all of our problems in the real world. But I love the passion. And the thing is, he means it too. He's like, he would absolutely do it. And so I think that that is kind of his funny superlative, is that he would most likely give himself probably every superlative, not even a superlative, just everyone. He'd be like, oh yeah, that's me.
That's I'm that guy.
Yeah.
I love that guy. Because it's so, first of all, kudos to him for picking Big Sexy, because it caught on like wildfire. I will tell you this, never once have I called him that because it makes me feel uncomfortable. Like, I would call him Big Delightful because I find Michael McCarron delightful. Big Delightful. I'm
Big Delightful.
Yeah. Big Delightful. That should be his new nickname. But I do love what you say about, like, he comes off as this brash, like, confident player, but he really is the guy that has that protective instinct for the people in his sphere. My superlative is most likely to welcome his daughter's date at the door with a shotgun.
that's a good one.
They're going to have a little baby girl. It's his first baby. They're due later on this year. But that is just a little bit who he is. Like, Michael McCarron strikes me as the person who loves his people very, very well.
He loves hard.
He loves hard. And when it comes to who is the guy who is going to step up for this team, who is the guy who's going to step up and say, you will not hit Alexander Carrier or, Spencer Stastny or whomever, Michael McCarron is that guy. And I don't think that it is because he is, like, I can't even think of the word, like a grumpy fighter guy who's always like got a chip on his shoulder. He isn't, in my encounter, he doesn't strike me as someone with a chip on his shoulder. He just is a team first guy. He is a teammate first guy. And, no matter whether you call him Big Delightful, Big Sexy, Big Mac, Michael McCarron, I think he has proved this season, like Cole Smith, like Kiefer Sherwood, these are players that have taken a lot of grief for, why are they in the lineup? Why are you putting them out there? Why aren't we giving these young players a chance? And at the end of the season, you have to look at what that identity line did. And they have been as important to this team's culture as that top line. And I stand by that. And he has been through it with this team. He's been through some things personally. And this season was I told you so. To everybody who wondered, why is Michael McCarron still on this team?
Yeah, because, of course, you look at his size and you think like, oh, well, that's why he's on the lineup.
Right.
And that's it. It's like, well, sure, if I was that big, I'd probably be in the NHL too. Like, no, it's not just about his size. And I think this year was huge in him showing that he's not just the big guy that goes out and hits people. Is that he actually, let's all remember, he was a first round pick. He was a first round pick for Montreal. And this year we started seeing flashes of why he was a first round pick, is he's not just a big guy. Like, again, this is probably going to oversimplify, and I'm sorry if I offend any basketball fans out there, but I feel like basketball is a sport where you can just be big and
Mhm.
not really be that skilled and still have a
Right.
career just because you're very large and you can block shots. And I think in hockey, that's not necessarily the case. And, I think that people always kind of saw him as like, yeah, he's a fourth line bruiser. Like, you send him out there if you want to just like knock some guys around. But other than that, he doesn't really bring anything. And I mean, again, career high offensively in every category this year. And you're starting to see that, again, the identity line. Well, you said, standing by that they were just as important to
Mhm.
as the top line. I mean, Barry Trotz would agree with you. Andrew Brunette would agree with you. They have said that. And there's a reason that line was the line that was starting every game going
Yes.
out against other teams' top lines, because when you're going up against Connor McDavid, you want guys like Michael McCarron and Cole Smith and Kiefer Sherwood out there to get under his skin, to knock him around, and to really kind of take the wind out of his sails in a way that those top line skill guys really can't do,
Yes.
or can't do as well. And I think that, I'm really happy for Big Mac. I think that, again, he's gone through so much personally, professionally, and he really, again, it's kind of like we talked about on the last episode with Kiefer Sherwood. And if you're healthy scratched, you're benched, or you're sent down, or whatever the obstacle is, or the bump in the road, there's like, you sink or swim. and
That's right.
Michael McCarron he swam this year, and it was great to see him do that. And not only just like survive, I mean, I feel like he thrived. It was really exciting to see that it doesn't have to be one or the other. It's not just like, okay, you're a fighter or you're an offensive threat. It's like, you can't be both. And I think he can. I mean, I think, not to bring up a sore subject, but Tanner Jeannot, I think, was kind of the guy that everyone looked at as like, okay, he is our big bruiser, but he had that one year where he scored all
Right.
those goals. And so we need him to be a volume goal scorer. And then when he wasn't uh, consistently, then I feel like that was kind of, he struggled a little bit, and almost like leaned really hard into the fighting and the
Right.
bruising and that kind of stuff, which is not necessarily bad. I'm not saying that's objectively a bad thing, but it's just like, we kind of saw his game was not quite as multi-dimensional as maybe we wanted it to be. But Michael McCarron, you're seeing that it is. And I think this is just the beginning for him. I think I would love to see him continue this kind of success next season. And that you mentioned how he is in the locker room. He's such a good, like, he's a guy who actually has come up, his name has come up a lot in just throughout the season in interviews and conversations with both players and with Andrew Brunette, about kind of like those, who are the secondary leaders, like who are the guys
Yes.
who maybe are not part of the formal leadership group, or they're not, considered to be leaders, but guys who this year in particular have taken a big step in their, their leadership, and maybe whether that's being more vocal in the room, maybe you're more vocal on the bench, on the ice, whatever it is. And Michael McCarron's name came up a lot in those
Yes.
conversations. Other people brought him up as a guy who's really taken a step this year. He loves his people so hard. And
Yes.
that is a guy that you would want to follow into the gates of hell. Like, you would want to follow him into battle, because he's going to have your back. So I think that that's a great leadership quality. And so it's nice to hear that he is kind of taking on more of that role in the locker room as well.
I think everybody would agree that this is a good, maybe not everybody, I should restate that. I think many people would agree that this is a good signing. And I think when you send that line out on the ice, something is going to happen. That was one of the things my husband said to me. Anytime those three are on the ice, something's happening. You lean a little forward in your chair when you see Smith, McCarron, and Sherwood go out on the ice, because they're going to do something.
Yeah.
And I think that's so valuable for this team. Love Michael McCarron. Of course, we wish him well with his baby. We'll probably mush all over his baby when his baby's born as well. Between
Seriously, like thoughts and prayers to whatever young man in the future or woman, whatever brave soul is willing to date his daughter, because that would not be for the faint of heart. That scares me a little bit.
I look forward to seeing his Gus Nyquist toes.
Oh yeah, but I also like I could see, anyone like taking his daughter out on a date, like watching his highlight reels of like his fights and stuff and being like, "Oh god, what have I done?
Yeah, he's
What have I
like,
got
before
myself
she comes
into?"
downstairs, why don't you sit on the couch with me and watch a little something?
Let's talk.
Let's talk. I love it so much. So we have wrapped up our season superlatives for the top line, for the fourth line. On tomorrow's show, we're going to go behind the bench. We are going to talk about Andrew Burnett's season. Next week, we're going to start talking about those middle six players. What did we see from some of these players that we liked? Where do we want to see some players step up? We're going to give their season superlatives as well. Before we wrap up this episode, though, Emma, tell everyone where they can find you and your work.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram, same handle, Emma_Lingen. I post all my work there, but you can also find it at the Hockey News.
And you can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work at Penalty Box Radio on social media and at penaltyboxradio.com. That's going to do it for today's episode of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We hope you all have a fabulous day. We'll be back tomorrow to talk some more about Andrew Burnett. We'll see you then.